A simple note handed to Emily Grant by a flight attendant on an ordinary flight spiraled into a dangerous journey, uncovering hidden truths that could topple the powerful. This is her story, full of secrets, courage, and unexpected allies. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and drop a comment below to share what you think. Your voice matters as much as hers. Emily Parker settled into her window seat on Flight 418, a cross-country flight from New York to Los Angeles. The hum of the airplane engines and the dimmed cabin lights were supposed to lull her into a state of calm. But tonight, an unshakable sense of unease gnawed at her. She was returning to California after 5 years away, hoping to finally reconnect with her family. The past had been a heavy shadow, especially after her father's sudden death and the estrangement that followed. She'd packed light, with only a carry-on bag and a heart full of hesitant hope. As the plane ascended, the cabin crew performed their routine checks. Emily watched the flight attendants move gracefully down the aisle, their practiced smiles offering comfort to nervous passengers. The woman who approached her seat looked different. There was something subtle but unsettling in the way she glanced sideways before lowering herself slightly to pass Emily a small, folded piece of paper. "For you," the flight attendant whispered, barely audible over the soft background chatter, then quickly moved on. Emily blinked, confused. She hadn't noticed anyone sitting near enough to pass something like that. The woman's face was neutral, professional, but her eyes held a flicker of something urgent. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the note. Inside, the handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. "Beware when you land. Not everyone on board is what they seem. Trust no one. This is not from anyone here. Someone who wants you safe." Her heart skipped. The note was cryptic, mysterious, and chilling. Who could have written it? If it wasn't from someone on the plane, how did the flight attendant get it? Panic bubbled inside Emily's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Maybe it was a mistake, a prank, or the product of her nerves. After all, she was alone, vulnerable, and emotionally fragile. She looked around the cabin. Passengers chatted quietly, some asleep, others glued to their screens. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but Emily's eyes kept darting to the flight attendant, who was now busy helping another passenger several rows ahead, her expression unreadable. Emily's fingers curled around the note tightly. She debated whether to show it to someone, maybe the lead flight attendant or even the pilot, but the thought of causing a scene made her hesitate. What if no one believed her? What if this note was a trap designed to lure her into fear? Trying to steady her breath, Emily stuffed the note into her jacket pocket and stared out the window into the night sky. The city lights of New York were shrinking below, and miles of dark clouds stretched ahead. She thought of her father, the man she barely understood, the man whose death had left so many unanswered questions. Could this note be connected to that? Or was it something entirely different? Her mind raced. The flight attendant's behavior wasn't suspicious in the conventional sense, but the secrecy of handing her a note was unsettling. Emily's thoughts shifted to the other passengers. Could any of them be watching her? Was there really someone dangerous on board? The words "trust no one" echoed through her head. She tried to focus on a movie playing on her screen, but the tension was palpable. A knot tightened in her stomach, and for the first time, the long flight ahead felt like a trap rather than a journey. The flight attendant passed by again briefly, offering a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emily's fingers brushed against the note in her pocket, as if it were a lifeline. Outside, the plane cruised steadily. The seatbelt sign flickered off, and passengers began to relax. Yet Emily remained alert, senses sharpened. She imagined the note's author watching her from the shadows, desperate to warn her, but unable to reveal their identity. Questions gnawed at her. What secret did she carry? Who wanted her safe, and from what? The rest of the flight passed in a haze of nervous glances and restless thoughts. Emily did not sleep. She waited anxiously for the plane's descent into Los Angeles, the city where her family and her past awaited. What awaited her there? The note had cast a dark cloud over what should have been a hopeful reunion. When the plane touched down smoothly on the runway, Emily's heart pounded not from relief, but from anticipation. The mystery had only just begun, and the cryptic message clenched in her pocket was a thread she knew she had to follow, no matter where it led. Emily sat in the cramped airport terminal, her pulse still racing from the flight and the strange note she had received. The noise of announcements, rolling suitcases, and busy travelers surrounded her, but she felt isolated, caught in a bubble of suspicion and confusion. She pulled the folded paper from her jacket pocket again, staring at the hurried handwriting as if it might suddenly reveal more secrets. The message had warned her to beware when you land and claimed it was from someone not on board. How was that even possible? How had the note made its way into the hands of a flight attendant without anyone else noticing? She tried to focus on her surroundings, watching people move purposefully through the terminal. The man who had caught her attention earlier, the one she thought might have been watching her, was nowhere to be seen now. That sense of being observed hadn't left her. With every glance over her shoulder, Emily felt eyes piercing through the crowd, searching for her. She swallowed hard, wondering if paranoia was slowly taking hold. After all, she was alone in a new city, with only a cryptic note for company. Determined to make sense of it, she pulled out her phone and opened a new note to jot down her thoughts. Was this a warning from a stranger who had seen something she couldn't? Or was it the start of something far more sinister? Emily tried to recall any odd behavior during the flight, any passengers who seemed out of place or the flight attendant's subtle nervous glance. Nothing concrete came to mind. The woman's professionalism had seemed flawless, almost rehearsed. Was the flight attendant complicit or merely a messenger caught in someone else's game? Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark, her childhood best friend. They had kept in touch sporadically over the years, and Emily had planned to meet him once she settled in Los Angeles. He was reliable, calm, and the one person she trusted to help her navigate whatever lay ahead. She hesitated, then typed a quick message about the note, careful not to sound overly frightened. Mark's reply came almost instantly. "That's weird. Are you okay? Wanted to come get you from the airport." His concern was clear. Emily felt a brief comfort, knowing someone was on her side, but also a renewed anxiety. Was she really in danger? She decided to take Mark up on his offer and texted him her location. As she waited, she revisited the note again. The phrase, "not from anyone here," replayed in her mind like a broken record. Who else, besides those on the plane, could have wanted to warn her? Someone with a deep connection to her family? Or perhaps someone watching from a distance? Emily's thoughts drifted to her father, whose sudden death had shattered her world. He'd been a man of influence, respected in his business circles, but surrounded by rumors and whispers. Had he made enemies who were now turning their attention to her? The idea was terrifying, but the note's warning felt too precise to ignore. Her heart jumped as she spotted a shadow move quickly near the entrance of the terminal. She instinctively scanned the crowd, but no familiar face appeared. The feeling of being followed clung to her like a second skin. She slipped the note back in her pocket and stood, pulling her coat tighter around her as Mark's car pulled up. As she climbed into the passenger seat, she explained the situation quietly, careful not to draw attention. Mark listened intently, his brows furrowing with each detail. "We'll figure this out," he promised, glancing at her with steady reassurance. But even as he spoke, Emily knew the journey ahead was fraught with unknown dangers. The message was clear. Someone was watching, and they wanted her to know the truth before it was too late. The ride through the city was tense but uneventful. Emily stared out the window, her mind spinning with questions and fears. The note had arrived out of nowhere, but its implications stretched far beyond this flight, this airport, and maybe even beyond her own understanding. Trust no one. That was the mantra now. When Mark finally dropped her off at the modest apartment she'd rented for the next few weeks, Emily felt both relief and apprehension. The walls seemed to close in around her as she sat alone, the note burning a hole in her pocket. What secrets were waiting for her in Los Angeles? And who was the stranger reaching out from the shadows to keep her safe? As night fell, Emily realized that the note wasn't just a warning, it was a challenge. A silent summons to uncover a past she thought was buried, and to face dangers she never imagined. With trembling hands, she unfolded the paper once more, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The flight had landed, but her real journey was just beginning. Emily's feet barely touched the ground as she stepped into the bustling Los Angeles International Airport. The bright overhead lights and constant hum of travelers a stark contrast to the quiet unease she carried from the flight. She clutched her carry-on bag tightly, eyes scanning the crowd with a new wariness. The cryptic note's warning echoed relentlessly in her mind. Trust no one. It wasn't easy to believe, yet the weight of the message pressed on her chest like a physical force. Somewhere among these strangers could be a threat she didn't understand. She moved toward baggage claim, her heart hammering in her ears despite the background noise. As she waited, she caught sight of a man standing near the carousel, watching her intently. His sharp eyes locked onto hers for a brief second before he glanced away, blending quickly into the crowd. The sudden awareness sent a chill down Emily's spine. Was he merely a passerby, or was he the embodiment of the warning she'd received? The thoughts spiraled in her mind, twisting hope into fear. Emily debated whether to confront him or alert airport security, but decided against it. She didn't want to cause a scene without proof, nor did she want to make herself a target. Instead, she moved quickly, collecting her suitcase and weaving through the sea of passengers, all while stealing anxious glances over her shoulder. The man was nowhere in sight now, but the feeling of being watched lingered like a shadow clinging to her. Outside the terminal, the warm California night was a strange comfort. The city's sprawling lights twinkled beneath the dark sky, yet to Emily, it felt more like a maze of uncertainty. She pulled out her phone and called Mark. His familiar voice was a balm to her nerves. She recounted the flight attendant's note, the strange man at the airport, and her rising suspicion. Mark's tone was steady, pragmatic. "Stay where you are," he said. "I'm heading your way. We'll figure this out together." As she waited on the sidewalk, Emily's thoughts drifted to her family, especially her mother and younger brother, whom she hadn't seen since she left California years ago. She'd planned to visit them soon, hoping to mend the fractured bonds that time and grief had strained. But now, with the note's ominous warning, every reunion felt like a gamble. What if her presence put them in danger? Was someone still angry about her father's death? Or was this an entirely new threat? Mark arrived minutes later, parking his car nearby. His face, usually warm and inviting, was etched with concern. "You sure you're okay to go to the family house?" he asked, eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. Emily nodded, gripping the note in her pocket as if it were a talisman. They agreed to stick together, moving carefully through the city's sprawling streets. On the drive to her childhood neighborhood, Emily kept her window down slightly, watching the world blur past. The sun had set hours ago, but the city never truly slept. Neon signs flickered, and late-night diners buzzed with energy. Despite the normalcy around her, Emily felt trapped between two worlds, her past and a future shadowed by secrets she hadn't yet uncovered. As they neared her mother's house, Emily's unease deepened. The quiet suburban street looked unchanged, yet held memories both tender and painful. She recalled her father's booming laugh in the kitchen, the family dinners filled with warmth, and the silence that had followed his passing. Now, the silence felt suffocating, a fragile veil over hidden truths. Mark parked discreetly a few houses down, and they walked the final distance together. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for the front door, the note burning in her pocket like a warning flare. She glanced around. The street was calm, but calm was deceptive. Inside the house awaited answers. Answers that might bring closure or open wounds she wasn't sure she could handle. With a deep breath, Emily stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender and old wood wrapping around her like a ghost from her past. The door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing her into a world where trust was fragile and every shadow could hide a threat. The flight had ended, but her real journey into a tangled web of secrets, danger, and redemption was only beginning. The moment Emily stepped across the threshold of her mother's house, the air seemed to shift. The scent of lemon polish and old books greeted her like a ghost of childhood. Everything looked nearly the same. The framed family photos along the hallway, the porcelain lamp on the side table, even the squeak in the wooden floorboard near the stairs. But something beneath it all felt off. A heaviness. A silence too thick to be just coincidence. Mark followed her inside, his presence steady, grounding. He placed her suitcase by the entryway, then glanced toward the living room with a furrowed brow. "You okay?" he asked gently. Emily nodded, but she wasn't sure. She hadn't seen her mother in 5 years. Their last conversation had ended with slammed doors and angry words. Accusations over her father's death, over secrets that had festered like mold. Her brother, Aaron, had been just a teenager then, caught in the middle. Now he was 19. She didn't know who he had become, or how much he knew about what had really happened to their father. The house was quiet, unusually so. No television hum, no kitchen clatter. Emily called out, "Mom? Aaron." Her voice echoed down the hallway and up the stairs, unanswered. She exchanged a wary glance with Mark. She said she'd be home all night. I texted her from the airport. Mark moved cautiously down the hallway, checking the kitchen and back door, while Emily walked slowly up the stairs, each step a collision of memory and fear. The upstairs hallway was dim, only a sliver of light under her mother's bedroom door. Emily knocked gently. "Mom!" No answer. Her hand hovered over the doorknob for a second before pushing it open. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, untouched. A half-full cup of tea sat cold on the bedside table. On the dresser lay her mother's phone, face down, as if it had been left in a hurry. Emily picked it up and pressed the button. The screen lit up. Several unread messages flashed briefly, but what made her blood run cold was the most recent notification, an email with the subject line, "She's arrived. Proceed with caution." Heart thudding, Emily tapped the message open. It was from an anonymous address. The body of the email was short, chilling. "She's landed. Make sure she doesn't get too close to the truth. Phase 1 is underway." Her hands trembled. She turned to find Mark standing in the doorway, his face pale. "There's no one downstairs." Back door was unlocked. In this, he held up a folded piece of paper, almost identical in texture and handwriting to the one she had received on the flight, was sitting on the kitchen table. Emily took it, unfolding it slowly. He warned them. They silenced him. "Now they're watching you. Do not go to the shed." The shed. In the backyard. Emily's heart lurched. Her father had always kept it locked, insisting it was just for tools. But as a child, she remembered hearing the low murmur of voices coming from there at odd hours. She'd once caught her father arguing with a man she didn't recognize, but he'd brushed it off, telling her it was business. When he died, officially of a heart attack, no one questioned it. But now, what is going on? Mark asked, his voice low, urgent. Who would send this kind of message? And what's in the shed that they don't want you to see? Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Everything was unraveling too fast. Someone had known she was coming. Someone had prepared. And worst of all, someone in her own family might be involved. Her mind reeled. The note on the plane, the strange man at the airport, now this email and warning. All signs pointed to something much deeper than a simple family estrangement or unresolved grief. Her father had been hiding something worth killing for. Mark placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We can walk away. Go to the police. Let someone else handle this." Emily looked down at the second note, her jaw tightening. "No. If someone's watching me, it means I'm close to something. And if they didn't want me to go to the shed." She looked out the upstairs window, where the small shed sat at the back of the yard, almost swallowed by overgrown ivy and shadows. "Then that's exactly where we're going." The grass was cold and damp beneath Emily's shoes as she stepped into the backyard under the dull light of a single porch bulb. The wind had picked up, carrying the distant sounds of the city. Honking horns, the low rumble of a train far off. But here, everything felt suffocatingly still. The shed loomed ahead like an ancient secret keeper, slouched in shadows at the far end of the yard. Ivy had crept up the sides over the years, swallowing the wood grain and roof edges like nature trying to bury it. A padlock dangled from the door latch, old and rusted but still intact. Emily's pulse quickened. Mark followed close behind, a flashlight in hand, its narrow beam cutting through the darkness. "You sure about this?" he asked, aiming the light at the lock. "If this is a setup, then I want to know what kind of trap they think I'm walking into," she said, her voice steady despite the fear lacing through her spine. She crouched beside the lock and examined it. It looked old but hadn't rusted shut completely. Her father used to carry a key on a chain that hung behind his study desk. She darted back into the house while Mark stood guard outside. In her father's old study, untouched since his death, she found it. The key was still there behind a stack of books, hanging like it had been waiting for her. When she returned, Mark stepped aside. Emily pushed the key into the lock, holding her breath. It clicked open with a metallic snap that sounded too loud in the stillness. She opened the door slowly. The hinges groaned as stale air escaped, musty, tinged with oil and dust. Mark swung the flashlight beam inside. The shed was cluttered, but not with tools. Shelves lined the walls, filled with files, ledgers, and several storage boxes. In the center stood an old metal desk and a battered filing cabinet beside it. On the desk lay a stack of folders, each marked with coded titles: Client Alpha, Janus Report, R3 Watch List. Emily stepped inside, her skin prickling as she crossed into the past. She picked up one of the folders and flipped it open. Inside were surveillance photos, grainy images of men in suits shaking hands, clandestine meetings in parking garages, some photos circled in red ink. Notes were scrawled in her father's handwriting. Blackwell knew. He was there in '03. Another sheet listed payment transactions linked to overseas accounts. There were names, dates, and vague references to something called Operation Redwood. "What the hell was your dad into?" Mark asked, looking over her shoulder. "I don't know," Emily whispered, stunned. Her father had been a financial consultant. Wealthy clients, private contracts, nothing that ever seemed dangerous. But this was no ordinary business ledger. This was intelligence-level work. It was espionage, conspiracy, and her father had documented it all, as if he knew one day someone, maybe her, would come looking. Mark opened another box and pulled out a thumb drive, its label faded. "We need to look at this," he said. Emily nodded, her mind spinning. The pieces were still scattered, but something was taking shape. Maybe her father hadn't just died of a heart attack. Maybe he had been silenced, just like the new note warned. And now, if they were watching her, they knew she was getting too close. "Let's take what we can," she said, grabbing several folders and stuffing them in her bag. She hesitated for a moment, then took the entire box containing the thumb drive. As they stepped outside, Emily paused and glanced back at the shed. A part of her childhood had just cracked open and spilled secrets into the night. Her father hadn't been the man she thought he was, but maybe he had tried to protect her in the only way he knew how, by keeping her in the dark until she was strong enough to find the light. Behind them, the house windows glowed faintly. Everything looked normal again, but nothing was normal now. Not the note, not her family, not the secrets locked in a rusting shed. She turned to Mark. "Let's get out of here." They walked quickly to the car, unaware of the figure watching from across the street, silhouetted behind a curtain, phone pressed to their ear. "She found it," the voice said quietly. It started. The drive back to Mark's apartment was quiet, but Emily's mind was anything but. Her hands clutched the box tightly in her lap, the sharp edges digging into her skin each time the car hit a bump. The streetlights passed like flickers of memory, brief, disjointed, vanishing before she could hold onto them. Her father's handwriting, the strange code names, the surveillance photos, none of it made sense yet, but it wasn't random. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to hide it, and someone else had gone through equal trouble to make sure she never found it. Mark parked in the underground garage beneath his building, a concrete bunker lit by yellowed bulbs that cast harsh shadows across the walls. They moved quickly through the hallways, careful not to draw attention, and entered his apartment on the 3rd floor. The moment the door closed behind them, Emily set the box on the dining table and flipped open her laptop. Mark plugged in the thumb drive. For a few seconds, the screen stayed black, then a single folder appeared. "Read me first." Emily clicked it open. A single video file began to load. The image was grainy, time-stamped 3 months before her father's death. He sat alone in what looked like the shed. Same desk, same cabinets. His eyes were bloodshot, tired. He looked older than she remembered, like the weight of his secrets had carved lines into his face. "If you're seeing this," he said, his voice low and steady, "then something's happened. I never wanted you involved, Emily. That's why I pushed you away. But if someone's gone after you, if they've sent you a warning, it means you're already in danger." Emily swallowed hard. Her father stared straight into the camera, eyes haunted. "I worked for them. Not officially. Not in the way they appear on paper. It started after September 11th. I was contracted to track financial patterns linked to suspected terrorist cells, offshore accounts, coded transfers. It was legal at first. Then things changed. The people I reported to stopped asking questions, started directing me to ignore certain names, certain countries. When I asked why, they said national security. But it wasn't. It was something else. They called it Redwood." The screen flickered slightly. Her father leaned closer. "I found out Redwood wasn't about terrorism. It was about power, surveillance, control, blackmail. They were collecting dirt on senators, CEOs, journalists, anyone who could be a threat. They laundered money through shell companies, manipulated stock markets. I started keeping my own files. That's what you've probably found. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I've had visitors. Warnings. I think they're planning to take me out." Emily covered her mouth. Mark's jaw tightened as they listened. "There's a man named Andrew Wexler. He used to be my handler. If he's still alive, he might help you. Or he might try to bury you. Either way, he knows more than anyone. He lives in Sacramento. Use the folder labeled Hera Protocol. It has the names, the dates, the accounts. It's enough to bring the whole thing down. But you have to be careful. Don't trust anyone. Not even..." The screen glitched violently. Not even... The video cut out. Silence. Emily sat frozen. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Her father had known. Not only had he been murdered, he'd seen it coming. He had tried to leave her a trail, breadcrumbs in a labyrinth of lies. But he had also hesitated at the end. Don't trust... Even who? Had he meant someone she knew? Someone close. Mark sat back in his chair, running both hands through his hair. "This is bigger than we thought. Way bigger. Redwood. Wexler. Hera Protocol," Emily said aloud, writing each one down. "We start with Wexler. If he's in Sacramento, we drive up tomorrow. First light." Mark looked at her. "You sure? No turning back after this." She didn't hesitate. "They've been watching me since I got that note. If they want me to be afraid, they should have killed me on that plane." She shut the laptop and stood. Behind her, the shadows in the apartment grew long. Outside the window, a black SUV idled at the far end of the street, headlights off. They left before sunrise, the sky still painted in navy and charcoal as Mark steered the car onto the interstate, the city lights shrinking behind them. Sacramento was just over 2 hours away, but the tension in the car made every minute stretch like elastic. Emily sat silently in the passenger seat, her fingers curled around the corner of her father's folder labeled Hera Protocol. She'd read the documents twice before they left. Dossiers, account numbers, and coded emails, all suggesting her father had uncovered something deeply corrupt within an invisible branch of government. The kind of operation you only found in paranoid thrillers or whispered rumors. Except now it was real. Her father had named one man in particular, Andrew Wexler, and according to the last known address in the folder, he lived in a modest ranch-style home in East Sacramento. By the time they reached the neighborhood, the sun had begun to rise, casting long golden streaks through the trees. The area looked quiet, peaceful, tree-lined streets, joggers with dogs, sprinklers watering trimmed lawns. It was the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Mark pulled to the curb, 2 houses down from the address. "You want to do this together?" he asked. Emily nodded, but her stomach was twisting. "Let's just see if he's even home." They walked slowly to the house, a white one-story with blue shutters and a small porch. A flag fluttered in the breeze. Emily rang the doorbell. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. A chain slid back. The door opened just a crack, revealing a man in his early 60s, his face weathered, eyes sharp and alert. "Yes, Mr. Wexler?" Emily asked. "My name is Emily Foster. I'm Thomas Foster's daughter." The door didn't open further, but something changed in his expression. He blinked, leaned closer. "Thomas is dead. I know. I think he was murdered." He didn't flinch. He just looked past them, scanning the street, then stepped back and opened the door wide. "Come inside." Now, they entered quickly. The inside was neat but sparse, bare walls, minimal furniture. Wexler locked the door behind them and pulled the curtains shut. He walked into the kitchen, returned with a mug of coffee and a small pistol tucked under his arm. "Start talking," he said, motioning to the couch. "Emily, Saturday, my dad left me a message. A video. He said you were his handler. He mentioned something called Operation Redwood." Wexler's face tightened at the name. He sat across from them, resting the pistol on the table without letting go of it. "If you're saying that word out loud, then you have no idea how dangerous this is." "I do now," she said quietly, "and I need answers." He sighed and rubbed his temple. Redwood was never supposed to come to light. Not officially. It started after the Patriot Act, an interagency collaboration to root out threats before they became visible. But it went off the rails. It turned into a tool for leverage, blackmail, even assassinations. Your father figured that out too late. "Why didn't you stop it?" Mark asked. "I tried," Wexler said, voice hard. "They buried me, ruined my career. I got out while I still could." Emily leaned forward. "But now someone's trying to bury me too. I got a note on a plane. Another one at my mother's house. Someone's watching me. My father said not to trust anyone, not even someone." The video cut out. Wexler nodded grimly. "That means he suspected someone close to you. Maybe someone inside the program. Maybe someone pretending to be a friend." Emily sat back, the weight of those words pressing down on her. "Then what do I do?" He hesitated, then stood and went to a small safe in the wall. He returned with a black envelope. "Your father gave me this 5 days before he died. Told me to give it to you, if you ever came looking." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single note in her father's handwriting. "If you're reading this, they've started watching you too. Trust no one without this phrase. The circle closes in silence. It's the only way to know who's real." Emily looked up. Wexler met her gaze. "They'll be coming soon," he said. "You have maybe 24 hours. After that, you disappear." Emily sat in stunned silence, the note trembling slightly in her hands. The circle closes in silence. Her father's handwriting was firm, unmistakable, every curve of ink radiating urgency. She whispered the phrase aloud, barely hearing herself. Mark stood behind her, pacing now, his hands fidgeting at his sides, as if searching for something to hold on to. Wexler's eyes never left her face. The room, already dim with drawn curtains, felt like it was closing in around them. "This phrase," Emily said slowly, "it's a code? A signal?" Wexler nodded. "A failsafe. Back when we realized the operation had splintered, a few of us loyal to the original intent agreed on a phrase. Anyone still trustworthy would recognize it. If someone responds correctly, you know they're on your side. If not," he left the sentence hanging, but the weight of what he meant was clear. Emily took a deep breath. How many people would still know it? "Very few," Wexler replied. "Most either disappeared or got absorbed by Redwood. Your father and I were among the last who tried to expose it. But the network, it's deep. Financial firms, tech companies, even parts of Homeland Security. That's how they stay invisible. You saw the files. This goes beyond surveillance. It's about leverage. Control." Mark finally stopped pacing. "So what now? We wait for them to come knocking." "No," Wexler said sharply. "You run." "I'm not running," Emily said, her voice low, steady. "I didn't come all this way just to hide." "You don't understand," Wexler said, stepping closer. "You've kicked over a hornet's nest. The moment you opened that shed, you became a target. They won't stop until they're sure you can't talk." Emily stared at him, her jaw tight. "Then let's make sure I do." Wexler studied her, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "All right, if you're serious, there's one more person who might help you. Her name's Camille Ashford. She used to work in cyber ops. Deep cover, highly compartmentalized. She vanished 5 years ago, went totally off-grid. If anyone can help you expose Redwood, it's her. But finding her won't be easy. How do we start? Emily asked. Wexler moved to a cluttered bookshelf, pulled out a thin black binder, and flipped through the pages. Camille left a digital trail, barely. Encrypted drop points, masked server activity in upstate New York, and ghost accounts with partial logins that appeared in Nevada. Last known trace was a ping from an abandoned observatory outside Reno. Emily raised her eyebrows. An observatory? She had a thing for quiet places, Wexler muttered. It fits. Mark leaned over the table. We can be there by tomorrow. Wexler closed the binder and handed it to Emily. If you find her, use the phrase. If she responds with, and silence keeps the truth, you can trust her. Emily repeated the exchange silently. The circle closes in silence. And silence keeps the truth. She tucked the binder under her arm. And if we don't find her, Wexler glanced at the drawn curtains, then at the small pistol beside him. Then hope you're ready to disappear. They left an hour later, slipping out through the back alley of Wexler's neighborhood. Mark driving a rented car with stolen plates Wexler provided. Emily sat in the back seat. Not because she didn't trust Mark, but because her mind was spinning too fast to face forward. She flipped through the binder again, maps, codes, a few low-resolution photos of Camille. A woman with tightly coiled hair, dark eyes, always looking slightly past the camera. Why would she hide in an observatory? She murmured. Mark glanced at her in the rear view. Maybe she got tired of seeing the world too clearly. They drove into the fading afternoon, Sacramento shrinking in the rear view. But Emily felt no distance from what she was running from. If anything, it felt closer now, like Redwood had eyes on every road, every camera, every passing face. And she wasn't wrong. Miles away, in a sleek, windowless office in Washington, D.C., a man in a gray suit watched a screen flicker to life. Satellite imagery. License plate recognition. A blurry frame captured from a traffic camera in Sacramento. He pressed a button on a secure phone. They've made contact with Wexler, he said. Initiate containment protocol. They crossed into Nevada just after midnight. The road ahead stretching into nothingness under a sky littered with stars. Emily sat in the front now, her knees pulled up to her chest as Mark drove, the hum of the tires the only sound between them. The desert rolled by in shades of silver and black, vast and indifferent. Somewhere out there, nestled in the stillness, was the abandoned observatory that might lead them to Camille Ashford, the woman who might hold the final key to unraveling Redwood, if she was still alive. Mark checked the GPS, its faint green glow painting the inside of the car in soft light. We're close, he said, squinting at the screen. Turn off some mile ahead. Emily nodded, clutching the binder tighter. She had studied the photos a dozen times by now, satellite images of the old observatory, its rusted dome half-collapsed, overgrown with desert scrub. According to Wexler's notes, the site had been decommissioned in 2007 and supposedly purchased by a shell company tied to a private defense contractor. Since then, it had vanished off official maps. They turned off the main road onto a narrow, cracked asphalt path that wound through low hills. No lights, no signs, just dust and quiet. Mark killed the headlights as they approached the final stretch, the observatory now looming ahead like a silent monolith against the starlit sky. The dome, once white, was now a skeleton of metal ribs and rust. Broken satellite dishes leaned against its base. A windmill creaked slowly in the distance. They parked beneath a rocky outcropping and approached on foot. Emily felt her heart pounding harder with each step. There were no fences, no warnings. Just the echo of their footsteps crunching through the gravel. At the base of the observatory, she spotted it. A narrow metal door, nearly flush with the wall, painted the same color as the rust. She knelt and brushed away some sand. A keypad. Mark crouched beside her. Think she's still in there. Emily glanced around. No lights. No sound. Only one way to find out. She typed in the code Wexler had included in the notes. Nothing happened. She tried again, slower this time. Still nothing. Then a soft click. The door creaked open an inch. They exchanged a look. Mark pulled a flashlight from his pocket, clicked it on, and pushed the door open. Inside, a concrete corridor stretched downward, the walls lined with thick wiring and metal pipes. They stepped in cautiously, the air suddenly cooler, smelling faintly of dust and oil. Halfway down the tunnel, the flashlight flickered, then died. Seriously? Mark muttered. Then, before either of them could react, a voice echoed from the darkness. Put the light down. Slowly. Hands where I can see them. Emily froze. The voice was calm, measured, female but firm. We're not armed, Emily called. My name is Emily Foster. I'm Thomas Foster's daughter. Silence. Then the sound of movement, quiet, practiced steps. A second later, a faint red light illuminated the hallway. A figure stepped into view, holding a compact rifle. She wore tactical gear, her dark hair pulled back, face sharp and alert. Say the phrase, the woman said coldly. Emily's voice didn't shake. The circle closes in silence. A beat passed. Then the woman nodded. And silence keeps the truth. She lowered the rifle. Get in. We don't have much time. They followed her down the corridor into a chamber beneath the observatory dome. Old control panels, repurposed computers, and a wall of monitors flickered with surveillance footage, desert roads, satellite scans, and heat signatures. Camille Ashford. You were followed, Camille said, pulling off her gloves. I saw the SUV an hour behind you. That was fast. They must have been tracking Wexler. Mark frowned. How do you know it's them? Camille tapped one of the monitors. 4 men. Military posture. Civilian rental. One's ex-NSA. The other 2 look like former contractors. I've seen their faces before. Redwood's cleanup crew. Emily stepped forward. Can you help us expose them? Camille studied her. That depends. How far are you willing to go? Emily didn't blink. As far as it takes. Camille gave a faint smile. Then let's show them what happens when the truth fights back. Outside, the wind picked up, and in the distance, headlights crept over the ridge. Camille moved like a soldier preparing for siege. Every motion crisp, every step calculated. We've got less than 20 minutes, she said, pulling down a metal grate over the hallway entrance and bolting it from the inside. They'll come through the access tunnel first. After that, they'll circle around the dome. We need to move fast. Emily followed her to a console covered in cables, circuit boards, and blinking hard drives. On the wall behind it, several monitors displayed surveillance feeds from motion sensors embedded in the hills. One had started flashing red. A heat signature. 4 figures moving in formation, closing in. Mark hovered near the exit, watching the door with tense eyes. What exactly are we doing here? What's the plan? Camille didn't look up. I'm holding a copy of everything your father found. Encrypted, fragmented, and scattered across 6 black sites. The only way to reconstruct it is from this server node. But I've never transmitted it because if they traced it, it would have exposed me and destroyed the evidence. Emily stepped closer. So we decrypt it, then release it. Camille's fingers flew across the keyboard. No, not yet. We need to send it through what's called a digital dead man's switch. It'll go out to major news outlets, international watchdogs, whistleblower sites. Only if I don't reset it every 12 hours. That buys us time to get ahead of them. But I need you to help finish the final layer of encryption. Your father built it with biometric locks, his and yours. Emily's heart skipped. My, Camille nodded. Retinal and voice. He embedded your biometrics into the final protocol as a fail-safe. If you're here, it means he trusted you to finish what he started. Emily swallowed hard and stepped forward. Camille scanned her eye, then handed her a headset. Repeat this exactly. Redwood cannot hide what was planted in truth. Emily took a deep breath and spoke the phrase clearly into the mic. A green bar flashed across the screen, then a cascade of code scrolled by. Files began to unlock. Camille exhaled. It worked. Mark turned from the door. They're 10 yards out. Camille didn't flinch. We need 3 more minutes. On the screen, folders labeled Hera Initiative, Blackroot Fund, and Operation Redwood opened. Inside were videos, financial spreadsheets, internal memos, surveillance footage, some even of high-ranking officials in private meetings, discussing covert coercion and targeted disappearances. Emily's stomach churned. This is all of it. Camille slid a USB key into the port. It'll clone the data in less than a minute. When we're out, we drop this in a safe box in Vegas. That's the upload point. A loud crash echoed down the hall. The outer door rattled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Mark backed up quickly. They're breaching. Camille stood and grabbed 2 smoke canisters, tossing one to Mark. We exit through the dome skylight. There's a service ladder to the roof and a trail behind the hill. They won't expect us to go up. The second crash was louder, metal groaning. The door wouldn't last. Camille yanked the USB key free and stuffed it into a pouch on her vest. Time to move. They sprinted toward a metal ladder leading into the belly of the dome. Above them, the stars still shimmered in the open sky, framed by the torn circle of the observatory roof. As they climbed, Emily could hear the final bolts snapping behind them. They burst out onto the dome just as the smoke grenades hissed to life below. Camille led them across the roof and onto the rear scaffolding, then down a metal stairwell half swallowed by desert growth. As they hit the sand, Emily looked back. Dark figures in tactical gear were storming into the chamber below, but the smoke bought them seconds. They ran hard, following Camille's every step as she wove through ravines and rocks. Finally, she ducked into a crevice hidden behind a cluster of boulders. A dirt bike and a rusted Jeep were stashed under camo tarps. Mark stared in disbelief. "You prepared for this?" Camille slid behind the Jeep's wheel. "Always. Get in." Emily jumped into the passenger seat, clutching the pouch. "If they get to the node." "They won't," Camille said, starting the engine. "Because by the time they realize what's missing, we'll already be ghosts." As the Jeep tore off into the desert, the observatory grew smaller behind them. But Emily knew Redwood was no longer the hunter. They were. They arrived in Las Vegas at dawn, the city still pulsing under the hangover of neon dreams. The sky turned pale above the skyline, that strange in-between hour when night hasn't quite left and the day hasn't fully claimed the streets. Camille took back roads and side streets, avoiding traffic cameras, gliding through the sleeping edges of the city like a ghost behind the wheel. Emily sat beside her, clutching the pouch containing the USB drive like it was radioactive. Mark dozed in the back seat, his head against the window, still breathing heavily from the escape. Camille pulled into an alley behind a forgotten strip mall, a few blocks off Fremont Street. The building she parked beside looked like an abandoned pawn shop, but the storefront was only a shell. Behind it, through a narrow metal door and a maze of halls, was a secure drop box location, a digital dead drop tied to a network of off-grid whistleblower nodes. It was the kind of place you didn't find unless you already knew it was there. Inside, the air was cold and dry. The only sounds were the low hum of a server rack and the quiet hiss of filtered air. Camille led them into a reinforced steel chamber. No windows, one desk, one outdated but heavily modified workstation. A security panel blinked green as she slid a chipped ID card across its sensor. "We've got one shot," she said, handing Emily the USB. "Once we start this upload, Redwood's gonna light up every asset they've got. They'll know this node is active." Emily stared at the computer, then back at Camille. "Then let's make it count." She slid the drive in. Immediately, the monitor lit up, encryption keys flashing in sequence, the interface demanding multiple confirmations. Camille moved quickly, typing in terminal commands, routing the data through 4 proxy countries. It's bouncing to Iceland, then Taiwan, then 2 darknets before it hits the mirror sites. That gives us maybe 4 minutes before someone notices the heat signature. Mark stood by the door now, fully awake, watching the street through a slit in the window. "And if they do?" Camille didn't look up. "Then we hold this building for as long as we can. If the upload completes, it'll release the entire Redwood archive to watchdogs, international courts, and every major media outlet with secure drops. That's the best we've got. After that, they won't be able to bury this anymore." Emily watched the screen fill with progress bars, each folder a piece of her father's legacy. Whistleblower accounts, blackmail materials, photos of government contracts, evidence of political manipulation. It was overwhelming. And yet, it all came down to a single upload, ticking upward 1% at a time. Outside, a black SUV pulled up 2 blocks away. Mark leaned in. Company. Camille cursed under her breath and reached beneath the desk, pulling out a shotgun and 2 sidearms. She handed one to Mark, then looked at Emily. If they breach, we hold them. No matter what. Emily didn't hesitate. We hold them. The first man appeared at the alley entrance, then another. They moved like professionals, clean-cut, tactical posture, earpieces in, weapons drawn but low. They weren't here to talk. Mark locked the door and jammed a metal bar across the hinges. How long? Camille checked the screen. 90 seconds. The front door shuttered. Emily stood by the workstation, her hand still resting on the USB drive, like it was sacred. If we go down, this still gets out? Camille nodded. The fail-safes are live. If the connection's severed, it triggers a backup blast across 6 encrypted mirrors. It's out of our hands now. The door cracked slightly as something slammed against it. Then again, louder. Camille crouched behind the desk, her eyes sharp. Get ready. Mark took position behind a filing cabinet, gun drawn. Emily didn't flinch. She stared at the screen as the upload reached 97%, then 98%. The door cracked wide open with a violent pop, boots thudding against linoleum. Camille shouted, "They're inside." The final progress bar hit 100%. Emily yanked the USB free and crushed it under her boot. A piercing alarm blared from the server. Across the world, thousands of screens blinked awake. The alarm kept blaring as the first agent burst through the door, muzzle first, eyes scanning, locked in a combat rhythm. Camille was faster. She fired a single round from her shotgun, striking low and sending him sprawling with a scream. The force of the blast knocked him back into the corridor, giving them precious seconds. Mark took the second gunman by surprise, landing a clean shot to his shoulder that sent the man crashing into a supply rack. Camille kicked the door shut and dragged a metal cabinet in front of it. "We've got maybe 30 seconds," she said, breathing hard. But Emily wasn't watching the door anymore. She was staring at the computer screen. It had gone dark, then suddenly lit up again with new windows flashing open, one after another, flooding the interface. Broadcast confirmation pings, external access logs, international IPs. It was happening. "It's out," she whispered. "It's live." Camille paused. "What?" "The mirrors. All of them. Look, Washington Post, Guardian, Bellingcat, ProPublica. They're pulling it. Real-time sync. Every major watchdog in the world just got Redwood." Outside, more agents were regrouping. Through the slit window, Emily saw 3 SUVs now. Men in dark uniforms scrambled for cover, coordinating positions. They weren't coming for questions. They were coming to a race. Mark braced himself against the far wall, wiping blood from a shallow cut on his temple. "They don't know it's already gone, do they?" "No," Camille said grimly. "And they won't care." Emily stood slowly, heart pounding but gaze clear. "Then we walk out, heads high." Mark turned to her, incredulous. "What?" "They came to kill ghosts. We're not ghosts anymore. If we disappear, they'll try to bury the story. If we walk out alive, we become the story. We take their power from them." Camille gave her a hard look. "That's a dangerous gamble." "It's the only one that counts," Emily replied. "You said it yourself. This is what happens when the truth fights back." Camille looked between her and the door, then finally nodded. "Okay, then we walk." The door burst open a second time, but this time Camille didn't fire. She raised her hands first, slowly, deliberately, stepping into the light of their rifles. Mark followed, keeping close to Emily. The agents hesitated, slightly thrown by the lack of resistance. "Get on the ground," one barked. Camille shook her head. "You're too late. It's done." They were dragged out of the building, handcuffed and forced to their knees in the alley as black-clad men barked into radios and began sweeping the interior. Emily said nothing, but held her chin high. Across the city, newsrooms were waking up. In D.C., red phones were ringing. And in living rooms across America, the name Operation Redwood began scrolling across tickers and timelines, each leak confirming the impossible. Evidence of illegal surveillance, psychological manipulation, suppression campaigns, political blackmail, even the names of public figures who had benefited from Redwood's quiet erasure of inconvenient truths. And then, silence. The agents outside began receiving frantic calls, one by one. They paused, looked at their phones, looked at each other. The man barking orders lowered his radio and turned to Camille. "What the hell did you do?" he asked. She smiled. "You ever tried putting toothpaste back in the tube?" Within an hour, they were in a federal holding facility under the pretense of national security. But the tide had already turned. Legal teams were assembling. Journalists demanded access. Whistleblower protections were activated under intense public scrutiny. By noon, thousands gathered in front of Capitol buildings with signs that read, "We see you. No more secrets." And by nightfall, the President of the United States addressed the nation in a hastily arranged press conference. "We have launched a full investigation into the allegations uncovered today. We take these matters with the utmost seriousness. No individual or agency is above the Constitution." Emily watched the statement from TV inside her holding cell, wrists still cuffed but heart strangely calm. Camille sat beside her. Mark leaned against the wall, arms folded, a soft grin pulling at his bruised lip. "They're trying to spin it," Camille said. "They could try," Emily said quietly. "But it's out now." She leaned back, exhaling. For the first time since that strange flight, she felt the weight begin to lift. The truth had its voice, and the world was finally listening. 3 weeks later, the nation had changed. Redwood wasn't just a name anymore. It was a headline, a hashtag, a reckoning. Congressional hearings had begun, live-streamed to millions, each session peeling back layers of secrecy that had once seemed impenetrable. High-ranking officials were subpoenaed. Corporate executives stammered through prepared statements. Retired intelligence officers pled the fifth. But there was one name everyone wanted to hear from, Emily Grant. She adjusted the microphone before her, hands folded carefully on the oak table, heart thudding beneath her blazer. A gold nameplate in front of her read, "Emily Grant, Civilian Witness." Behind her sat Camille Therese and Mark Dempsey, now under protection, their silence a testament to the gravity of what Emily was about to say. The room was packed, journalists, lawmakers, aides. The chairman, Senator Owens, leaned forward. "Miss Grant," he said, voice echoing across the chamber, "you understand you're here voluntarily?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady. "You were the recipient of a note aboard Flight 229. That note, you claim, led to the unearthing of the Redwood Initiative. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And that note wasn't written by anyone on the flight?" "No. It was a dead drop planted in advance. Meant only for me." A murmur rippled through the room. The chairman raised a hand for silence. "You said in your affidavit that the note contained a phrase your father used. Truth is louder than silence." Emily nodded. "It was his way of telling me he was gone. But also that he had left behind everything. That I was the final piece." He leaned back, contemplative. "Miss Grant, do you have any knowledge of how this Redwood operation was able to avoid detection for over a decade?" Emily took a breath. They didn't avoid detection. They avoided accountability. People knew, or suspected, but fear kept them quiet. Redwood thrived on silence. Threats, erasures, forced disappearances. Even death. My father uncovered the truth, but he knew if he tried to release it himself, they'd stop him. So he built a chain of trust. And in the end, it led to me. Another senator jumped in. Senator Callahan, sharp-eyed and unconvinced. "Why should the American people believe this wasn't a hoax or coordinated attack against our institutions?" Emily turned to face him. "Because the documents are real. The money trails are real. The deaths are real. Because people are already going to prison. Because the people who came after me didn't come with subpoenas. They came with guns." Camille shifted slightly behind her, but said nothing. Emily continued, her voice rising just slightly. "This isn't about left or right. This isn't partisan. Redwood was built to protect power, not people. And it stayed hidden because too many were willing to look away." The room was silent. Some leaned forward, others scribbled notes. The chairman cleared his throat again. "Miss Grant, What do you want to come of this? What's your goal? Emily looked around the room, the weight of weeks finally pressing in behind her eyes. I want my father's name cleared. I want every victim of Redwood acknowledged. I want legislation that ensures this never happens again. And more than anything, I want truth to matter again. The chairman nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Grant. You've been braver than many paid to protect us. She sat back as the next witness was called, her pulse still racing. Behind her, Camille gave her a small nod. Mark reached forward and gave her shoulder a quick squeeze. Outside, the streets buzzed with protesters holding signs. Emily Grant told the truth. We believe her. Redwood is real. People were watching, listening, rising. Something that had once slithered in the dark was now burning in daylight. As Emily exited the Capitol later that afternoon, sunlight broke through over the marble steps. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted her name. She said nothing, only held her head high as she stepped into the waiting black SUV. Inside, Camille looked over from the passenger seat. You did it. Emily shook her head. We did it. And we're not done yet. She stared out the window as the city rolled by. No longer a maze of shadows, but a map of what came next. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was justice. Days had turned into weeks, but the fire ignited by Redwood refused to burn out. The nation was caught in a whirlwind of revelations and reckonings. Every evening, news anchors recapped new findings. Arrests of top executives, leaked memos revealing manipulative campaigns, and whistleblowers emerging from the shadows. Emily Grant had become a symbol of courage and truth, though the cost had been immense. She barely recognized herself anymore. Gone was the woman who once boarded Flight 229, clutching a mysterious note handed to her by a flight attendant. Now, she was a warrior in a battle she never expected. The protective detail kept her close. Camille and Mark never far, their vigilance a constant reminder of the dangers still lurking. At night, Emily often stared at the ceiling of her safe house, replaying moments of that harrowing flight, the encrypted USB, and the desperate hours in that dusty alleyway in Las Vegas. The memory of agents crashing through the door, their voices sharp and merciless, haunted her dreams. But the victory, the flood of truth released into the world, was worth every sleepless night. One afternoon, Camille pulled Emily aside in the dimly lit kitchen. We need to talk, she said quietly, voice laced with urgency. The pushback is coming. Emily nodded, already sensing the undercurrent of threats beneath the surface of political theater. Redwood's network was vast, and even dismantled, pieces of it remained, shadow cells ready to strike back. What kind of pushback? Camille's eyes darkened. Discrediting campaigns, threats to your family, attempts to rewrite the narrative. The powerful don't like being exposed. They will use every tool they have. Mark joined them, grim-faced. We've already had a break-in at the office of your legal team. Nothing taken, but the message was clear. Emily's jaw tightened. Then we prepare. In the following days, they fortified every contact, every digital trace. Lawyers filed motions for protective custody of Redwood's remaining witnesses. Investigative journalists doubled down on their coverage. And Emily found herself standing before crowds of supporters, activists, students, everyday citizens, all chanting for accountability. But even as the world rallied, Emily felt a quiet urgency pressing in on her. The deeper she dug, the more she realized Redwood was only the surface of something far larger. Corruption had bled into institutions that promised justice and security. Unseen puppeteers pulled strings behind the curtain. To fight them, she needed allies, and she needed a plan. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cityscape, Camille handed Emily a dossier. This is what we've gathered from inside sources, names, operations, front companies. It's a roadmap. Emily flipped through the pages, heart racing. This goes all the way to the top. Camille nodded, which means we're just getting started. Mark spoke quietly. You wanted justice. This is the real test. Emily looked up, determination blazing. Then we don't back down. That night, alone for a moment, Emily opened her father's old journal, the last thing he had left her. Pages of coded entries, hints, warnings. His handwriting wavered on the final pages, but the message was clear. Truth was fragile, but unbreakable. Silence could be shattered. With renewed resolve, Emily closed the journal and stared out the window, city lights shimmering like distant stars. The fight ahead was daunting, but she wasn't alone. Together with Camille, Mark, and a growing coalition of truth seekers, she was ready to tear down the walls Redwood had built. For her father, for the victims, and for a future where secrets no longer ruled. The dawn was coming, and this time it would not be silenced. The pressure was mounting like a storm on the horizon. Every day, Emily felt the walls closing in, not just from Redwood's remnants fighting back, but from an unforgiving system reluctant to change. The hearings and protests had shifted public opinion, but entrenched power still clung tightly to the reins of control. The deeper Emily went, the more dangerous the path became. One morning, Camille rushed into the safe house, her face pale but resolute. "They've moved," she said, urgency in her voice. "There's a hit squad targeting key Redwood witnesses. We have less than 48 hours. Emily's heart sank. "Who?" Mark, standing nearby, grimly shook his head. "Names we never expected. People we thought were allies." The trio gathered around a cluttered table, maps and dossiers spread like battle plans. "This isn't just retaliation," Camille said. "It's an all-out effort to wipe out the truth." Emily clenched her fists. "Then we fight." The next 2 days became a whirlwind. Every call was screened. Safe houses rotated. Legal teams worked around the clock to secure emergency injunctions. The media, now fiercely protective of Redwood's revelations, amplified the dangers they faced. But despite the chaos, Emily knew this was the defining moment. On the eve of the decisive congressional vote that would determine Redwood's future, Emily found herself alone in the dim glow of the safe house's living room. Her phone buzzed, an encrypted message. "Meet me at Pier 14, midnight. One last truth." "A." She frowned. The mysterious A had surfaced once before, a shadowy insider leaking secrets, but their motives remained unclear. Could this be a trap? Camille appeared behind her. "You can't turn it down. This might be what we need to end this." Mark nodded. "We'll be nearby. You're not going alone." At midnight, wrapped in a long coat, Emily slipped into the foggy night. The pier was silent, the only sound the distant lapping of water against weathered wood. A figure stepped from the shadows, a man, mid-40s, face partially obscured. "You came," he said softly. "Who are you?" Emily asked, guarded. "Call me Archer. I'm one of the few inside Redwood who wants it to fall." He handed her a flash drive. "This is the final piece. Names, locations, and operations that tie Redwood to some of the highest offices in the country." Emily's pulse quickened. "Why now?" "Because the system can't protect them forever. I'm done hiding." Suddenly, headlights swept the pier. Vehicles screeched to a halt. Our men poured out, weapons drawn. "Go!" Archer shouted, pushing Emily toward the shadows. Gunfire cracked through the night. Emily's heart pounded as she ran, ducking behind crates. Camille and Mark's voices echoed through her earpiece. "We're on our way." She slipped into a narrow alley, breath ragged, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. Moments later, Camille and Mark appeared, guns blazing. Together, they fought their way back to safety, adrenaline fueling every step. Back at the safe house, Emily connected the drive to the secure network. The files unveiled a web of corruption more tangled than anything before. Money laundering, coercion, election tampering. The evidence was undeniable. As dawn broke, Emily drafted her speech for the congressional vote, her voice steady but fierce. This was more than a fight for justice. It was a battle for the soul of the nation. Later that day, before a packed chamber, Emily stood to address the assembly. The truth cannot be buried. Redwood is not an isolated shadow. It's a symptom of a system broken by greed and secrecy. Today, we choose transparency. We choose accountability. We choose the people. As the vote commenced, the room held its breath. When the final tally came in, it was unanimous. Redwood was dismantled, its architects exposed. The nation would never forget. Emily exhaled, tears stinging her eyes. The final stand was won. But the fight for truth, she knew, would never truly end. The courtroom emptied slowly, the heavy air of judgment giving way to a cautious sense of hope. Emily sat quietly, the weight of months, no years, lifting from her shoulders in gentle waves. The Redwood Initiative, a name once whispered in fear and conspiracy, was now a chapter closed, thanks to the unyielding courage of a few who refused to stay silent. But for Emily, the journey was far from over. She gazed out the window of the small apartment provided under protective custody, the city lights twinkling like distant promises. Camille was sorting through files at the cluttered kitchen table, while Mark mapped out their next steps on a whiteboard scrawled with notes and timelines. The fight had been won, yes, but the scars left behind were deep. Emily turned to them, voice steady but soft. "What now?" Camille looked up, eyes tired but resolute. "Now we rebuild. Redwood was a symptom, but the disease runs deeper. We have to make sure what happened never happens again." Mark nodded. "We've got allies in Congress, activists on the streets, and eyes watching. The country is awake." Emily smiled faintly, remembering the note on that flight, the note that changed everything. It all started with a single message, a call to listen when no one else would. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. The door opened, and a young woman stepped in, holding a small envelope. "For you," she said, eyes bright with something unspoken. Emily took the envelope, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a simple card, embossed with gold lettering. "Truth is louder than silence." A single line beneath read, "Thank you for giving voice to the unheard." Tears pricked her eyes. She folded the card carefully and placed it on the table. This is why we fight." Weeks passed. Emily returned to the public eye slowly, sharing her story in speeches, interviews, and community events. She met families affected by Redwood, survivors who found solace in her courage. The media dubbed her a hero, but Emily knew the truth belonged to everyone who had dared to speak up. One afternoon, standing before a crowd in a packed auditorium, Emily felt the same fire she had on that flight, only stronger, more focused. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was hers to shape. After the event, Camille approached her with a small device. "Encrypted message," she said, "from someone new. Wants to help." Emily glanced at the screen, a map pinpointing another site of corruption, far from Redwood but eerily familiar. She exhaled deeply. "Looks like the fight continues." Mark smiled, standing beside her. "But now we have the truth and each other." As they stepped outside into the crisp evening air, the skyline of Washington shimmered against the fading sun. The journey ahead was daunting, but Emily felt ready, because she had learned that even in the darkest moments, when silence seems unbreakable, truth has a way of rising, louder and brighter than ever before. And as long as there were voices brave enough to speak it, a new dawn would always come. Thank you so much for joining Emily's journey through courage, truth, and justice. This story reminds us that even when darkness tries to silence us, the light of truth can shine through and change the world. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, please show your support by subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your favorite moments, or any questions you have. Your voice matters just as much as Emily's did. Together, let's keep the conversation alive and continue to seek the truth, because every story deserves to be told. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.